In this module, we'll be diving into the editing tools available in the sequencer interface that allow us to edit animation sequences, perform keyframe animations on control rigs, and use the curve editor, as well as ultimately bake all of our edits down to a new animation sequence. So let's start by taking a look at our synchronized clip here. We'll go back to the beginning and hit play to review.
The hungry purple dinosaur ate the kind zingy fox, the jabbering crab, and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
Okay, so everything's in sync and it's working. But let's just say that our director came in and just announced that the dinosaur that has been cast is allergic to shellfish. So we're good with the fox, we're good with the whale, but we can't have the dinosaur eating a crab. First of all, let's make sure that we know which portions of our audio clip correspond to our dialogue. So if we go here, I think we're talking about the fox.
Kind zingy fox.
All right, so we can go here and tap the M for mark key, and that's applied a mark right here on frame 138. If I move our playhead away from 138, we can see the letter A here. Going back here, I can right-click and change the label of this. So let's just call this Fox. And then here we have our crab dialogue. So I'll tap M, right-click, and rename that crab. And finally, right here, I'll go ahead and select this, right-click, add a mark, right-click, and change this to whale. Okay, so we want to get rid of the portion of dialogue that relates to the crab. We're already here at the end of that piece of dialogue, so we can slice or split our segments into two right on this frame. So I'll start by selecting dialogue, right-click, choose Edit, and Split Section. Same for our image sequence. And finally, once again, for our animation sequence that's driving the face. In each case, the Split Section command split the selected animation track at the current frame that the playhead was on. So now I can go to the crab frame, and again, repeat for each one of these tracks. Right-click, Edit, Split Section. Note that Control/ is the shortcut for this. So let's go ahead and use that here on our frames. Incidentally, the slash is the key on the US keyboard that's just to the left of the right-hand shift key. And now for the audio, Control/. So now we have a separate segment right here just for the crab. We're not going to need this for our clip anymore, so I'll drag select these and hit delete. This portion of the clip is now removed. Now we can move our whale back over in place of where the crab was. What I'm going to do is use the square controls on the end of my horizontal scroll bar here to zoom into my timeline in this area where we need everything to come together. So I'll just click one of these squares, pull here, and click another square and pull here. So now I can drag my whale clip over so it touches where crab is. And same for our frames. And finally for our facial animation. I'm going to try and keep that all lined up on a single track. Notice that our marks stay put because they're tied to the sequencer timeline, not to the clips themselves. So I can go ahead and right-click on this crab mark and delete this mark. I can click on our whale mark and drag that in to follow where all the other clips are. Okay, so we can audition this. We'll move the playhead back a little bit and listen to the dialogue and watch our video and animation.
Zingy fox and the mad whale and started bending.
All right, so the audio sounds fine. Of course, our video is only being used for reference, so the fact that that jumps between the two clips, that's no problem. However, this is going to be our final performance, and we don't want that to pop from one clip to the next. We need that transition to be smooth. To make this possible, we'll zoom in just a little bit more And we take the second section, go to the right edge, click, and drag to the left. And now this gives us some overlap, essentially a crossfade. We can do the same with our earlier clip, the left-hand clip, selecting that, grabbing its right edge, and dragging to the right. This gives us a crossfade. Let's take a look at this animation as we play back this time. I'll give it a little more runtime.
Kind zingy fox and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
So we have a little bit of an issue here where our crossfade is actually stomping over some of the dialogue right here. So let's make sure we bring the end of this transition to before the dialogue for the whale. This transition is being eased in and eased out. We can adjust the rate at which these fade into one another by right-clicking, choosing Options, and choosing from one of the other transition curves. I'm going to use Linear. With that selected, you can see that these transition clips are now linear, and there'll be a smooth linear transition. Let's try our playback once again.
Kind zingy fox and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
Nice. So this is pretty good. We've probably done enough editing at this point that we should be saving another version of our sequence. So we'll just go over to the tool button here for actions, click on that, and choose Save As. This will let us save a copy of this scene. I'm going to just add a suffix of _TK02 for take 2 of this scene. Go ahead and hit save. And now we have a whole new sequence asset for our edited sequence. I can just double check by going to the content browser and seeing we have the original scene 1 and scene 1 take 2. There's an asterisk here for scene 1, so it still has the edits that we've been working on. Let's make sure we remove those by right-clicking, choosing Asset Actions, and selecting Reload. We'll say yes to this dialog. And now we know that scene 1 has not been edited, and our scene 1 take 2 is the one that we're working on. All right, so let's go back to Sequencer and look at ways that we can have more detailed editing control over our sequence. In particular, we might want to adjust the way the mouth moves for some of the dialogue here. Let's take a look.
Fox and the mad whale and start.
So right there's a little bit of a problem. Right here we have a dialogue that says the mad whale. And when we play that, the lips don't quite ever come together on our metahuman as the character says mad whale. It'd be great to be able to adjust the controls of the face so that we get a good lip contact for the pronunciation of the word mad. We can do this by baking all of the animation that we have now over to the MetaHuman control rig, where we can edit it with keyframes and the curve editor. To do this, we simply go over to the face track here on the left side of our sequencer, right-click, and choose Bake to Control Rig, and then Face Control Board Control Rig. We select this, accept the defaults, and hit Create. Sequencer will copy all of the information that we've edited in the animation sequence and bake it to a set of keyframes on the MetaHuman Face Control Board Control Rig. So let's put this to use. At this point in our dialogue, our performer brings her lips together to say the word mad, but the MetaHuman's lips don't quite touch. So we can use keyframes on the control board track to bring those lips together. Now there's a set of controls called Lips Towards Teeth. You can see these here on the Tweakers panel. Lips Towards Teeth. We're going to use these controls for this adjustment. One of the reasons we're selecting this is that the Faceware performance capture doesn't edit these controls. So these controls have all 0 keyframes. Let's take a look. I'll go to the search tracks and type in toward. And here we can see that we have tracks for mouth, lips towards teeth, we're going to ignore the simple mouth towards, and there's down, up, and left and right. But instead, we're going to use lips towards teeth. Now, if these don't come automatically expanded, you can use the triangles here, simply clicking them to expand these. Let's move the playback head so we can find the moment when our performer brings her lips together. Looks like that's right about here, in my case, on frame 240. So I'm going to set a mark at this point, tapping the M key, and right-clicking and changing the label for this mark to the word mad. So now we know where the lips need to come together. As we scrub through the timeline, we can see that the values are always 0. So we're free to delete and set our own keyframes for these controls without disturbing any of the data that we captured through Faceware. So let's just select a number of these keyframes on either side of our mad mark and delete those existing keyframes. Next, we'll move to the position that we marked earlier. Let's take a look at our metahuman. Just use our mouse to move our view so that we can see both our metahuman and our performer. And let's adjust the values of the lips towards teeth curves to bring these lips together. Note that I have the auto key option turned on. If in your sequence timeline this option is turned off, want to click this button here to activate it. Now, as I adjust the value of each of these controls, we can watch the metahuman lips as they come together and dial in the setting that we'd like. I'll just bring out these bottom lip here. This will be the bottom lip on the left side. Now they're touching, but let's bring the top lip down as well. Just a little bit. And there we go. Now we don't want this single keyframe to be taking over the entire clip, but we know that our zeros are already keyframed for all of the rest of our frames. So we can keep this as it is.
And the mad whale.
Or we can set our own 0 keyframe a little bit earlier. 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0. So that we get in and out of this lip press more efficiently. 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0. Enter. So there's our keyframes. Let's look at that played back.
And the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
Great. So let's take a look at another scenario, this time where we want to edit values that have been recorded by Faceware. Clear out my filter and collapse our control board rig. And let's scrub our way to the beginning of the clip. Here, if we look at our reference and compare it to our metahuman, we're going to see that our performer has a bit more shape to her lips than the metahuman. Let's see what we can do to address this. The shape of this performer's lips here can be reproduced using funnel controls in the metahuman facial control rig. We can find those, of course, by going to our search tracks and typing in the word funnel. And here they are. We have right and left for the up and down set of lips. The only thing is, when we expand these, we notice that there are non-zero values. This means that Faceware is generating values for the funneling of the lips, and we wouldn't want to necessarily lose that life. So let's add a new section to the controls for the control board rig. We can do this by going to the face control rig. And rather than absolute, we want to choose additive. This way, the keys that we add to this will be in addition to the keys that we've already gotten from Faceware. So we'll choose additive. And now we have two groups of face control board rig. The block of animation additive area has been started here at frame 47 where our playback head is. So let's drag that back to the beginning. And it should automatically go to the end of our clip. Just to make sure that's the case, we'll just extend it here. That way, any keys that we add to this additive section will work. This additive section does actually contain all the control curve values for the entire control board rig. So if we deactivate our filter here, we can see that we actually have two separate sections for the face control rig. One is additive, and the other is all the data that we have from Faceware. All right, so let's go to those funnel controls and see if we can adjust the values here to get a better shape from our metahuman. So we'll keep an eye on our metahuman lips as we increase the value here. And now we start. Maybe not all the way up to 1. Try this just at 0.9. Now this is the upper right, so we'll do the same for the upper left. 0.9. That's clearly too much now that we have both sides. So let's ease that off. Let's try 0.6. Looks a little bit better. Lower lip will give a little bit. Let's try 0.4. I'm just using the tab key or shift tab to go up, tab to go down. 0.4. And our performer's lips are a little sticky on the edges. So let's add some stickiness to our lips to bring those edges a little closer together. Before I leave this, I want to go ahead and set some keyframes for this. So we'll go ahead and key each of these. And we'll also set 0 keys before and after this so that we don't have this funneling happening throughout their entire animation. Let's zoom in on our timeline. So here our lips should be together. We'll set zeros. 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0. I can also drag select these keyframes. Click and drag, select all 4, Control C copy. I'll move my playhead to a few frames after where her mouth is open, and Control V paste. And so now they're back to 0. So for all the frames after this, we'll have no adjustments to funnel, and all the frames before this, there's no adjustments. But in between these two sets of 0 value frames, we'll be approaching this funneling right here. All right, let's take a look at the stickiness of our lips. So right about here, 0.53 looks good. We'll set this the same way. And look at that. A much better pose for our metahuman. Again, we'll key here. Go a few frames earlier when her lips should be closed. We'll zero these out. Drag, select, copy, Control C. Go a few frames after. And Control V paste so that we remove that stickiness to the lips. We might want to bring these 0 frames after a little bit closer. There we go. Okay. So this is another way that we can edit. As one final note, I just wanted to point out that the sequencer does have its own curve editor built into it. It's accessed by this last button on the sequencer's toolbar. In this case, let's take a look at the jaw motion that was recorded by Faceware and adjust it using the curve editor in sequencer so we can get these lips to come completely closed. So rather than sticky, I'll go ahead and search for jaw. And scroll up here and find our jaw control. There's an X and a Y value, and we can see that the Y value isn't quite 0 here, and it's leaving the lips open. Our performer's lips are closed. So let's just adjust this playback so we find where her lips start to open right there. So before this frame 45, we'd really like to keep the lips completely closed. let's go into Curve Editor to adjust this. So I have the jaw curve selected, and I'll click here to activate the Curve Editor. Here we have the same Curve Editor interface that we had with animation sequences. Let's focus on the first several keyframes for this animation. I'll click drag to select them and tap the F key to fit them to the frame. I'll lower the top of this window so we can see our performer and our metahuman. And here we are on frame 44, and we see that at this point our performer's lips are beginning to open, so that's fine for the metahuman. But on 43, our performer's lips are closed, and yet our jaw is still open. So let's edit these keyframes. I can have my selection mode, I can have my transform mode, and let's go ahead and deactivate the snapping for the verticals. Now, a few options I have are that I could simply select these keyframes. This is the Y set of keys. If I wanted to make sure that I'm only working in Y, I could go ahead to my control curve for the jaw and click on Y. And now I'm only seeing the Y values. So again, I'll select at the beginning of the curve, tap F to fit this to the frame. I'll use 2 mouse buttons to click and drag to move. So here's my 0. I want to get all of these frames here down to 0. So I will click and drag to select these. And because my transform tool is on, I can go ahead and stretch these, scale these effectively together. And then click and drag to, sorry, not on the bottom here. We want to click and drag to bring these keys down. So let's deactivate our transformation tool, select these keys, and simply click and drag them down to about 0. So now our lips are closed, and then they open up smoothly. Maybe we smooth out this curve a little bit. So that's one approach. Another is I could simply delete all of these keyframes right here using the delete key. And to correct this, I can right-click on my first key and change it from being linear to be user. And I'll do the same with my second key. So click, right-click, user. And now I can set tangents for these. Ease into this curve. And again, our lips are closed, and then they open in sync with our performer. So this gives us full access to all the features of the Curve Editor, including the frequency filtering. Right here in Sequencer, where we can see our video playback along with our metahuman performance. With all of these edits in place, maybe it would be a good idea to bake all of the results down to a single animation sequence that we could reuse in other sequences or even migrate to other projects. To do that, we can exit from our Curve Editor. In our Sequencer window, we find the face track, right-click, and choose Bake Animation Sequence. Here, we'll select our MetaHuman folder, Danielle, and Animations as the destination for this new asset, and we'll give this a name. I'll call this HPD for Hungry Purple Dinosaur, underscore, edit, underscore, and maybe this is VO2 for version 2. We'll say OK, accept our defaults, and export to animation sequence. This gives us a new animation sequence that's available in our content browser. Here's that version 2. We can select that and Control S to save. So now all of the edits that we just finished in Sequencer are available as a single sequence. And we can put that to use here in Sequencer simply by muting our face control rig, right-click, and mute. And now all of these keyframes will be ignored. We can add our animation sequence back in simply by deactivating our filter to show all the tracks, bringing our playback head back to the beginning of our clip, frame 0, and finally going to the face animation track and adding an animation, in this case HPD Edit version 2. Now the animation's added in as an animation sequence, and we can hit play to play it back.
The hungry purple dinosaur ate the kind zingy fox and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
So there you go. A number of different ways that you can edit the data that you've captured in Faceware directly in Sequencer while referencing video and audio from your original take.